Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Cooperative Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Welcome, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative. And this morning, we have the absolute pleasure of having Casey Fannon on with us this morning. Casey is the acting executive director of the National Cooperative Bank. He's filling in for our late, great Chuck Snyder. Good morning, Casey. It's nice to see you. Nice for you to be on the show with us this morning. Thank you for taking our time with. You were just appointed the executive director. How do you feel about that appointment?
You know, I'm humbled and thankful. NCB is a great institution. You know, Chuck left it in a great place. So I'm honored, to be acting CEO of NCB, and very proud of what the bank's done and what we'll continue to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So let's get a little background on you. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts, a suburb north of Boston. My whole family was from the Lynn area. A lot of them are still up there.
Is that Lynn, L-Y-N-N? Lynn, Massachusetts?
L-Y-N-N, that's right.
I never heard of Lynn, Massachusetts, north of Boston.
Yeah, you'll have to, we're in the water. You'll have to come up there sometime.
Okay. And what about school?
So I went to Bentley University in Waltham, Massachusetts. I got a finance degree from Bentley. I was always interested in, the financial markets and the economy. So that was really what I wanted from day one. And, as I was graduating, interviewing at different jobs, I think I found NCB and they found me. So we found each other.
Wait a minute. But before you go to that, did you study anything on co-ops while you were doing your finance degree at Bentley?
Interesting. No. There was very little cooperative training or education in my finance studies.
So what year was that? What year did you graduate?
Oh, now you're going to date me. I graduated in 1996 from Bentley University. It's funny, Vernon, when I did an interview on campus when I've been at NCB my entire career. And so when I was flying down to Washington, I had to study up on co-ops. So I went to the library and took out all the books I could find on cooperatives. And, sadly, there weren't very many. But I found what I could, and it was predominantly about housing co-ops. Mm-hmm. And, studied up on co-ops. And, found a great match with NCB. The funny thing is, having not really studied co-ops in college, I was interviewing for jobs and I was deciding between NCB and a mutual insurance company. So it was kind of funny. I think it was destiny, I guess. So that's how I found NCB.
1996, you graduated. You're talking about don't date you. So I graduated in 1969. So okay. Same date, 1996 or 1969. Same digits, but a little bit different order. So you're a young boy. Okay. Okay. And you, like me, though, did not study co-ops in college. And I went and got a master's in math and then an MBA, and nowhere did I hear anything about co-ops. So you found about it much earlier in your career, right out of college. I was, 20 years out of graduate school before I heard about co-ops. And also housing, which was interesting. We have it in similar.
I was lucky. I was lucky to find it early and, fell in love with it early and, learned here at NCB and with our customers and, the different markets. A great run.
So what was your first job at NCB out of college?
So the bank has a program called Professional Development Program, and it's a rotational program that you get to really visit with several teams around the bank, and it was a great program. We still have it. We've had a lot of leaders in the bank come up through that program. And so that That was my first job at NCB. I was lucky enough to sit next to Stan Dreyer. As soon as I started the bank, I sat next to Stan, and I could hear over the cube him calling all the executives and CEOs of the nation's co-ops, and I learned a lot from Stan in those early days. So I was very lucky to have that experience. But as you know, I kind of came up through the housing co-op side of the bank. That's where I spent my early career at the bank.
So Stan Dreyer. Now, you all have the Stan Dreyer Spirit of Co-op Award. Is that right?
We do. We give it away every year at our annual meeting.
So Stan Dreyer has meant a lot to the bank to name your highest award after him.
Stan, as you know, he was head of NCBA CLUSA. Stan played a pivotal role in the bank's creation and was an employee of the bank for quite a while. And he was sort of the driver of the bank's mission and spirit really for many years, and trained a lot of people as an inspiration for many of us.
So you sat beside Stan Dreyer, and I just want to say, one year I got that Stan Dreyer Spirit of Cooperative Award, and that was like, it set me on fire.
You're wearing the medal, though. You should be wearing the medal.
I may start doing that every day. I may start doing that. And you sat beside him and sort of learned about cooperation and all of the people. My two mentors in the housing industry was Roger Wilcox, who died a couple of years ago at 97, and Herb Fisher. And Herb was very instrumental in getting the bank formed, too, in those early days, along with David Thompson and so many great cooperators. And I would almost literally sit at their knee as they would teach me about co-ops and how co-ops worked. It was phenomenal. So you got Stan Dreyer, and I had Roger Wilcox and Herb Fisher, older guys in the world, saying, okay, come on. I was older than you in terms of age, but baby also in terms of cooperation and understanding co-ops. And they took me around and mentored me in this world.
Yeah. And just, Stan was a gentle guy and just a great guy. And so in addition to learning, co-ops in NCB, just a great guy to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems to be a lot in the co-op world. Herb didn't kind of fit that when he would hit you on the head. He was that kind of teacher. Okay. But Roger was that kind of guy. So you were in this professional development career out of college to learn the bank, going to different areas of the bank. And so where did you land after that, the professional development?
So I landed in the housing co-op team, focused on market rate co-op, limited equity co-op. As you know, we have an active program with securitization at Fannie Mae, and I led those teams for a while. And there's just been a lot of activity in the housing, co-op housing market over the years, and I've enjoyed, learning about, construction of housing co-ops, manufactured housing co-ops, limited equity, both in New York with Mitchell Hamas and DC, as you know well, and around the country. So I spent, the first part of my career in that housing space, and then over the years really grew into other cooperative businesses that the bank runs, and so added to my portfolio of businesses over the years. I was chief lending officer, probably named chief lending officer, five years ago maybe. I'm responsible for all the bank's business production.
When I met you first, 10, 12, 15 years ago, I was with the National Association of Housing Co-ops, and you were on the housing side. And that's how I met you when you were doing that work. So I have it that housing co-ops help people to come together and have a safe space to raise a family. And then they have a community, and they get their voice. They can say things. How did you find the cooperative housing, not just the financing of it and the brick and mortar of it, but the community of it, the people? How did you find working with?
I mean, I would sum it up with pride of ownership. When I walk into housing co-ops, I know I'm walking into a co-op. We've all walked in, other types of buildings or other, communities. I think you find a sense of pride in cooperative ownership, and you see that in, high-end co-ops. You see it in urban, rural co-ops. I think people take not only pride of their physical space and where they raise their families and that they have their homes, but also in controlling the activities of the co-op. I think that the co-op governance structure really empowers people and I think gets them active, gets them involved in their community. They get to meet their neighbors. They care for their neighbors. And it just strengthens the community. I think it's good for society and certainly the people that live in the co-ops. So, I mean, that comes through really every time you walk in the door.
So pride of ownership, it takes me to Dame Pauline Green when she was the president of International Cooperative Alliance, said that co-ops help people to come out of poverty with dignity,
Absolutely.
that pride of which poor people a lot of time lose in our culture because too often they are blamed for being poor and the system will make them poor, but co-ops help them to get out of that poverty, both in terms of having money, but more importantly is having pride. Okay, and that's what you see when you go into, and that's the limited equity co-ops which are throughout the U.S.
And you see that really on the conversions, right? I mean, when people buy in, they feel that pride, but when there's a conversion where you have this, large group of people that are, going from renters to owners all at the same time, and the process it takes to get to that point, there's great pride and joy in their faces, and it's a great thing to see.
Because too often people that are on the lower income level of our society never see themselves as owning. And then in D.C. is TOPA, and in New York it was at Mitchell-Lama, but different programs that the city has to help people to buy. So TOPA gives a tenant first right of refusal so they can buy it. And I've seen that too. Now, as a property manager, and that's how I learned about co-ops, the hard part of it was getting people to move their headspace from renter to owner. And once they were able to do that, that pride even became more, and they had voice. So you got a chance to see that, and I got it, and we both have that in common. So what did you do next?
So I think over the years of, I've spent a lot of time in the grocery space, the hardware space. As you know, we finance, food co-ops and independent retailers that belong to co-op wholesalers, worker-owned co-ops that we have across the country. And we do some solar lending as well, which is really concerned for community. We think it's, leading to a more sustainable environment. So I've really touched, all the businesses that, we were very active in credit union space. We have a very large number of credit union customers that form a solid base of our deposit. Really have touched all the businesses over the years.
So we're going to stop there and take our first break. But you just listed a lot of the different co-ops. So when we come back, I'm going to list the 4 different sectors of co-ops and what kinds of co-ops are in there.
Sure.
And I really want to get to what are some of the benefits of co-ops that you have learned how long have you been at the bank now?
Around 26 years.
26 years. Okay. Started when you're 21. You've been there 26 years. Got it. We're going to take our first break. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and we're talking to Casey Fannon, who has been with the bank for 26 years. He's been with National Cooperative Bank for 26 years. Started when he got right out of college, and that's where he's spent his whole career so far. He started at age 21. He's been there 26 years, so he's been with the bank over half of his life, learning about co-ops because he didn't get it in college, didn't get it in elementary school or junior high or high school, knew nothing about cooperatives, but he was pursuing 2 jobs. One was with the bank and one was with mutual insurance. Both of them, this mutual aid, this working together in community to create community, people sharing their resources, sharing their skills, their dollars, their pennies to create a community. And I told you, I talked to you about the 4 different types of co-ops, which he has mentioned that the bank has been working with. The first one is it really depends on who owns and controls the business. If the business is owned and controlled by the employees, it's called a worker co-op. Therefore, any business you can think of could be a worker co-op. If it's owned and controlled by the persons that uses the products or services, It's called a consumer co-op. And there you have housing co-ops, and we've been talking about that, where Casey started his career in housing co-ops at the bank, and I did too, with managing co-ops. And then there's credit unions, the people that make the deposits own the business. Food co-ops are the people that shop, often own the food co-op. And in the food co-op, it could also be a employee or worker co-op. The workers could own it, or in hybrid, both the consumer and the workers own it. If a group of people come together to buy products that they need, then it's called a purchasing co-op. Farmers do this, artists do this. They come together, buy the products that they need and or services, and this company creates the skill set and normally buys in volume so they get a better quality at a lower price by buying in bulk. And the last group is a marketing co-op, and sometimes they're called producer co-ops. A group of farmers, let's say you had 9 milk farmers, they say they're going to create a business that will buy their milk, and so they know where they're going to sell it. And that could be Land O'Lakes or Cabot Creamery. Farmers that produce cranberries may go to Ocean Spray, or they may join it. And then there's a group of artists like Ujamaa in Pittsburgh, and last month, Casey was Native American Heritage Month, and I interviewed a group in Zuni Pueblo, Zuni tribe in New Mexico, and they have an artist marketing or producer cooperative similar to Ujamaa, and they produce Native American jewelry. And I would suggest if you really wanted to see that, I took a virtual tour. You could go to Zuni, Z-U-N-I, PuebloArt.com, and you can get there. And if you wanted to find out about Ujamaa, it's UJAMAA collective.org. And you can buy and shop there for these mainly black ladies who produce jewelry, similar kinds of products as the Native Americans. So those are your 4 types. And Casey has been working with all of them. He told us right before the last break, he's been working with all of these different co-ops providing financial services. So did you find, Casey, that some of the same benefits of cooperation that you found in housing, you'd find in these other types of co-ops?
Oh, for sure. But even beyond, my NCB life, like I would say shortly after, joining the bank, there were 2, I would say, formative co-ops that touched me. One was after we had our first child, we joined a babysitting co-op in our community. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners, Vernon, know McLean Gardens in Washington, D.C. They had a babysitting co-op, which was critical for my wife and I, as we didn't have any family down here, and that got us involved in the community in a wonderful way. And then
let me ask you about, before you go to the second one, because that one is interesting to me, a babysitting cooperative.
Yeah, it was great.
So you have babies, and then do the parents own the co-op, or is it an employee-owned co-op?
No, it was parental, and we traded babysitting hours for each other on some scale, depending on how many children you had. We had 1 at the time, so it worked out pretty well. But it was meaningful, and so you talk about how it impacts you. I mean, it brings you part of the community again. You get to know your community. You're helping people, and it deepens relationships.
And it solves a real critical need for babies,
particularly for a transplant to Washington D.C. for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that turns out for poor people, one of the major problems is finding babysitting that they can afford. And so some form of a babysitting or child care cooperative where everybody can share in doing the work brings the cost way down. And you can be there with your child and other children to help raise them.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. So you and your wife, you babysitted other kids too?
Oh yeah, I'm very capable. Very capable. I've changed a few diapers.
Okay, me too. Okay, what was the other one in your personal life?
We sent all 3 of our children to cooperative nursery school, which again has the same benefits of community and deepening relationships. So but from a professional standpoint, we've certainly touched. The bank has touched, and our wonderful team, many co-ops that you just described beyond housing, worker-owned co-ops. And, the lovely thing about worker co-ops is, you talk to anybody, and they know the business, and it's amazing. I was in a business trip to Minneapolis a few years back, and I sort of popped into the Hub Co-op, which is a worker-owned bicycle co-op in Minneapolis, and it was unscheduled, but I was in the neighborhood, and I popped in and just introduced myself and to the folks working in the store, and they immediately jumped into the financial statements, and they knew how the co-op was doing, and what their plan was, and talk about pride and real ownership. It was clear. So you see that really throughout the co-op world.
You're talking about all of the employees, the maintenance guy that's fixing the bikes, the person behind the
Sure.
sales counter.
Yeah.
They all know the financials. They see the books. They know how much
do.
profit they're making or not. Okay.
That's right.
Know what they need to do.
Yeah.
And
they know the initiatives the co-op is taking or has underway. It's again, as the governance and the true ownership they have in the company.
So I've popped in places around the U.S. also, and I'll continue to do it because I love talking to cooperators because of that pride that you see, that having voice. Too often people, particularly in low-income communities, don't have voice, and that gives them tremendous pride that goes on into their family. So that's one of the huge benefits of co-op. And then another benefit is if there's a profit, they get to say what happens to that profit. Do you find that too when you're working with cooperators?
Oh, I mean, that's member economic participation. That's one of my favorite principles. It keeps the wealth and the income and the capital sort of in that ecosystem of cooperatives, right? So particularly in a time of we're seeing growing inequality, keeping either the profits or passing on lower costs, depending on how a co-op is structured, keeps that wealth in capital in the co-op system, and it helps if it's a consumer co-op, it helps the consumer. If it's a purchasing co-op, it helps a small business owner or another co-op. I think that's critical, and one of the major differences and important differences that co-ops have, compared to other ownership forms. I think it's essential.
So we just talked about principle 3. There are 7 co-op principles. And I say no matter what the co-op is called, if it has co-op in its name, doesn't mean it's a co-op. It just has a co-op in its name. It's a co-op if it's operating by those values and principles of cooperation. And that third principle is member economic participation. In the housing co-op, there's a membership fee. You have to buy in. That's normally in all co-ops. Food co-ops, there's some kind of fee to buy in. And if there's a profit, you can get something out of it. And what I like about it most, Casey, is the members decide what happens to that profit. Nobody else, not the man, not the boss, not the slave owner. Excuse me. Okay, I didn't go. All right. Okay. All right. And talk about, in the next minute or so, this volunteer and open membership when you talk about slave owners. That really literally slipped out. But the other reason I like co-op was its first principle, volunteer and open membership. How do you find that?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical, right? I mean, everyone has a seat at the table, but more than that, they have a voice, they have a vote that's open, inclusive, and that's, it's goes back to Rochdale, right? I mean, that was one of the founding principles. And so it's critical, I think, for every co-op. That I think is a differentiating factor, particularly in this day of age, hugely important. And I think it's a source of pride.
So that's the first principle, volunteer and open membership. It doesn't make any difference with your gender, male or female, with your political affiliation, Republican, Democrat, independent, your race, black, white, pink, green. It just doesn't make any difference. Just religion, no, it just doesn't make any difference.
Right.
If it's a co-op,
co-op member,
and it's operating as a co-op, it's open to everybody. And we're going to come back and talk about the other 7 principles, but I particularly want to talk about, Casey, when we come back, you have some huge shoes to fill, filling Chuck Snyder's shoes. I want to talk about Chuck a little bit with you and how you're going to fill those shoes. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Casey Fannon is with us today. Just announced this week that he's the acting Chief Executive Officer of the National Cooperative Bank, filling Chuck Snyder's shoes. And before we talk about that, I'd like to finish talking about the 7 principles. We talked about Principle 1, P1, voluntary and open membership. We talked about member economic participation, which are 2 that I like. But the third one is democratic member control. How have you seen that work? 1 member, 1 vote.
So, I mean, you see it in all co-ops. I think that the one that jumps out in my mind is I was up in Massachusetts looking at a resident-owned community that, Paul Bradley at Rock USA and his team converted to limited equity manufactured housing co-op. And, I think we sat in a room with about a dozen folks, and, I think that their role in governance, their newfound, empowerment to run their community was just very meaningful to them. You could see it in their faces. You could see it in the stories they told. That shift from being a tenant, with not the nicest landlord, okay, let's put it that way, shifted to them having control of their future. It was a low-income community, and that shift, right, from not having a voice, not having a vote, to having a vote alongside, all your other, neighbors, made a very impactful difference in, their outlook for their future. And not surprisingly, they were thrilled. So, that's how I see that governance and that 1 member, 1 vote really impacting, the human side of it.
So the mission of the bank, and I give a shout out to National Cooperative Bank every chance I get, because you all have been our partner in both supporting us financially, but more importantly, Chuck, R.L. Condra, and Murray Alex Blanton, they've just been there giving us advice and encouragement, who we should be talking to, who's in the co-op world. And it's just been a great partner. And your mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities. And that always gets me, that part, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. So when you're talking about this, and when I grew up in West Virginia, they were called trailer parks. They're now, because it has such a bad connotation and negativism, that they're called mobile home parks. And mobile home parks could also be houses that are built into manufactured homes. So it's more than trailers, but often trailer parks where people had low income. They're low income communities, whether they're white, black, Hispanic, it just doesn't make any difference, because again, growing up in West Virginia, we were in the neighborhood I grew up, we were all working poor, and there were black and whites. We didn't have any Hispanics, didn't have any foreign folks, but blacks and white. We grew up on the same hill, climbing the same trees, playing cowboys and Indian marbles. Okay, just poor, didn't make any difference. But when you get to own it, that's where you're talking about, and you have a vote and you have a voice. I love that democratic member control, and that's a great example. But I find it as I travel around and just pop into bicycle shops or taxi shops or any kind of cooperative business, you find that same kind of pride and ability to vote and voice. And the fourth one is autonomy and independence, and that's that control, ownership and control. So can you give us an example of how you've seen that autonomy work and that control?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you have to maintain that autonomy and independence. I think, the wonderful thing about co-ops is that, ownership and control is with its members, right? There's no outside force that is influencing the direction of the company, whether that be, unrelated investors, government control. It's really, you want to maintain autonomy and really have the co-op exclusively serving the needs, both economic and social needs of the members. And I think if you start bringing in external influences, whether they be profit-minded or, through a government entity, it starts to, take you a little off course potentially, or you run the risk of going off course. So that autonomy is, I think, critical to just maintain the integrity of the mission of the individual co-op.
And Internationally, I've had a number of people on the show talk about that, how government sometimes would try to get in, but they end up learning that, keep your hands off the co-op. The people have to make the decisions. The membership have to make the decisions. And the same thing is when they go.
I think in Europe you'll see a little bit more of a government hand. I think in some of the co-ops more so than in the States, and so but you do have to keep that control with the members.
And the first thing that I saw in co-ops was the fifth principle working, and that was education, training, and information. And having taught for 12 years in my career, and my mother was a school teacher, learning is huge for me. And that was the first reason that I fell in love with co-op, was this principle number 5. And I'll just say real quickly, every co-op I see and every annual meeting I go to of cooperators, that's what it's all about, training, getting that knowledge.
And there's not enough of it, right? I mean, going back to, where we started the conversation, like, in the library, I couldn't find many books on co-ops back in business school. So it's, there's not enough of it, but, there's a lot of co-op, and NCBA does a great job, training, communicating, and there's a lot of, great resources out there with co-op development centers and such. But I think we could always do more on the education side, NCB included. I think there's always more. I mean, you've heard it said co-ops are the best kept secret. We need to get the information out. I think people know that co-ops are a good thing. They can kind of explain what they are. The average person on the street has some sense of what a co-op is, but I think the more they learn, the more successful and more co-ops will be created.
So in 2011, there was a group of us cooperators, 150 of us, went to UN because the UN had decided that 2012 was going to be the year of the cooperator internationally. And Chuck Snyder got up and said, co-ops are the best kept secret. And you just said it too. And that's one of the reasons when I brought to Chuck a couple years after that, 8 years ago, 2013, I brought him this idea that came out of the National Association of Housing Co-ops of doing this radio show so that we could get people to understand co-ops, really get people to understand the brand and what is for, like the values that we're talking about now: ownership, voice, vote, education, knowledge, training, how you make decisions together. And then you get to the 6th principle, cooperation among co-ops, and you mentioned that.
P6 is huge, and that's a big initiative right now across the industry. NCBA is taking the lead, and NCB's been a big supporter and an advocate of the P6 initiative that they launched. We recently had a Zoom call with about 40 plus cross-sector co-op leaders, really with the goal of bringing co-op leaders from different sectors together to brainstorm and solve for a need for capital with new startup co-ops and young growing co-ops. Capital raise in a co-op can be difficult, and so we're reaching across sectors. Big co-ops, large co-ops, small co-ops. Folks that are starting technical assistance providers who are working with the cooperator community. Really a goal of how can we create some structure, some vehicle, some product that can fill a gap that exists right now in that early co-op development, and whether that be equity or debt or some combination, really that seed capital that will allow for a new co-op or a growing co-op to grow. So that's an example of P6. I think that that's one angle of the P6 initiative. There's others that NCBA is working on, but that's one that I've been involved in, and NCB's involved in, and I think some of the larger co-ops will as well. Very excited about that because it's a chance for some of the more mature co-ops like ourselves, pitching in and helping the next generation.
And NCB is a co-op.
Oh, yeah, we're a member owned. I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, well, no. So, this P6, housing co-ops have something called replacement reserves, which you're very familiar with. And Herb Fisher brought to the National Association of Co-ops 15 years ago is how we could take all of the housing co-ops, I don't know about all of them, anybody that would want to, and pool this replacement reserve to help start up worker co-ops or help start up other forms of co-ops. Most is a replacement reserve. If it's a roof, it may not need to be, you may not need to have that money for 15 years. And how can it be used to help the cooperative ecosystem, as you were just talking about? How can it be helped? And how can then the co-ops, particularly limited equity co-ops, get credit unions to loan $1,000 or $5,000 to new members for their member participation, but they have to put up, because a lot of times poor people don't have $5,000 saved.
Right.
And that would be a great place for this cooperation among co-ops. And so anyway, when you all have these Zoom meetings, would you please let me know? Because I'd like to be sitting on the wall listening to what the ideas are, maybe have something to add, but I'd like to know so we can get it on air of these different examples of P6.
Yeah, no, I think there'll be some. I think there'll be some real movement. It got delayed a few weeks with Chuck's passing, but I think that there's going to be some real movement with the next steps we take.
And then there's P7, concern for community, which is in the DNA of co-ops. Concern for community. How have you seen that work? So
I think that most co-ops are serving more than just an economic need, right? There's some social need, and I think by definition that's concern for community. I think one of the ways the NCB has really put that to work is our focus on solar. We've done a lot of solar. I'll give you an example of a it's not co-op specifically, but it's sort of big tent co-op, right? In the sense that it has some of the same principles, although not the same structure. Community solar is a way that individuals like you and I, who we may not have a roof to put solar panels on, can subscribe to a larger, solar array, a commercial solar array, and get guaranteed lower cost electricity than what the grid would otherwise provide. And that's supported through, federal and state subsidies. And so we've financed some community solar projects. So that has the concern for community from an environmental perspective, for sure. But your point about if you can save a little bit of money on your electric bill every month, if it's $25, $35, that's going to have a greater impact on a lower income household, right? I mean, a $25 a month savings may not be an incredible amount of money for an affluent home or an affluent family, but that could be a difference maker for a low income community or a lower income family. So I think that concern for community, both on the sustainability and environmental side, coupled with helping those who need it the most, is a way that I think NCB's very interested in growing.
Casey, thank you. We're going to go into our final break. I love these principles, but the main thing I like are the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for one another. Golden rule, if you will. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. Information is power. This is Vernon Oaks, and the program is Everything Co-op, and we are giving you information about co-ops, the National Cooperative Bank, and hopefully you'll take this information and put some action to it, and when you put that action to it, that's where you get the power. And we talked about the power that Chuck Snyder had in the last 2 weeks. There were things like he was genuine, he was a mentor and a friend to everybody, and one person said, Casey, they thought they were special until they heard the people on the show and found out he was a friend to everybody. He had magic dust that he spread around. There was the Chuck factor. He left a legacy that you're coming behind him to fill those shoes. And it was said he was somebody to emulate and learn from. Not a normal banker. He was a people person first and a banker second. And he said he was the ultimate cooperator. People first, planet second, profit third. Had profit, but it came in that priority, people first. So how do you see yourself filling those shoes? Or came out in the finance side just like he did. Well, he was a CPA and moved into the people side. How do you see doing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right about, Chuck was a good man, a special man. We had a time of remembrance for Chuck. And to your point, we had several people say, until I heard everybody talk, I thought I was Chuck's favorite, because I think he made everybody feel special.
No, I was his favorite. What are you talking about?
So Chuck was a friend and mentor. I'm very thankful, for the time I had with Chuck. I think, Chuck cared. And I think that, in filling Chuck's shoes, that will continue. I mean, I'm not Chuck. I'll be a different leader than Chuck, but I think, I've been here at NCB for 26 years, and I think one of the reasons I've been here so long is, I care about the bank, I care about the people of the bank, and our customers and members. And, I think one of the things, Chuck and I have in common are we're good listeners. I think that we have to listen, and that's listening to our employees, listening to customers. Like one of my favorite parts of working at NCB and in my jobs over the years has been visiting with members, getting out of the office, going to visit on site, breaking bread with folks, getting to know people, understanding their business, how the bank helps them grow their business. And that's critical. I think you have to listen. You have to listen to what, people's struggles are, what their successes are, what their needs are, and not only in good times. That has to be in bad times too.
Most importantly, bad times, because a lot of times people throw their hands up and want to kick you out the door in the bad times. But how do you work with people in bad times? Yeah, most important.
And it's like if it's only good times. Someone said you can't be selling umbrellas on a sunny day, right? And so I think back. I got a good lesson in one of the financial crisis of like 2007, I guess. It was a tough time to be a banker. Let me just put it that way. It was a tough time. And Barry Silver, it was so easy just to make tough decisions and not make a loan or what have you. And Barry Silver would say, can't forget about the customer. It has to be about the customer. And he was exactly right. I thank Barry for that. I've told him that. And you have to maintain that focus on the member, on the owners of the members in NCB's case. And I think that's how I'll fill Chuck's shoes, is continuing to care about NCB's members and our customers and the people behind them. I think that's what Chuck's always done. I think that's what I've always done and will continue to do. And to your point on, and the other thing Chuck used to say all the time, and you've heard him say it probably 1,000 times, we have to do well to do good.
Yep.
And in other words, you need to be profitable in order to do the good things we do. We just signed off on a bunch of grants the other day, and that was made possible by the profits we make. And so I think that's something that I've spent a lot of my time, as you said, like using the right side of my brain, to make sure we have a few nickels to throw around to the co-op community.
And part of those grants are to historically black colleges and universities. Is that part of the ones you've just signed up on?
Yeah, no, we've made contributions to historically black colleges and universities. We just did some grants to the Drivers Co-op in New York City, which is sort of a platform co-op looking to compete with Uber and Lyft in the city, and some other low-income communities in Ohio for housing development. But the list goes on, as you know. I mean, Mary Alex is talking about the Chuck factor.
Yeah.
That's alive and well. So, I think doing well to do good is critical.
So Chuck factor was these grants and ways of helping folks, helping communities. And I talked about the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. And that's the piece you said, caring for others is what Chuck did. And that's what you will continue. And like you said, you'll have your own management style. You're your own man. And so was Chuck. But that caring for others is the piece, which is nothing but the cooperative values. So if you do the cooperative values, you can fill the shoes. Now, I'm glad to hear you take the visor off, you take the financial hat off and get out and go visit co-ops and be with people, learn what they need, and then create innovative financial and related services to help the members and the cooperatives and the members. So, yeah, keep doing it. Keep doing it.
Yeah, no, and look, at NCB, I've always said we sort of fight above our weight. We're a $3 billion bank, but we're competing alongside banks much larger, and I think that's a tribute to the employees at NCB, Got a lot of smart, hardworking people here, and long tenure is a commonality here at NCB, and I think it's because people love to work here, but it results in very strong employees who know our businesses, know our markets, and have that understanding, so we can be creative and create strong products, competitive products, low interest rates for loans. So it's definitely part of our mission.
So I've got a product I'd like for you to consider here for a minute real quickly before we take the last 3 or 4 minutes to talk about the future. But in D.C., there's something called HPAP, Homeowners Assistance Program. And the co-op I live in had gotten approved by NCB to do share loans. Share loans is, for everybody out there, it's like a mortgage, but their share certificates as opposed to a deed, so it's called a share loan. And I had a school teacher who had, or at least the co-op did, and was going to buy a unit. And with HPAP, she had 25% down. You all called for 20% down, had very good interest rates, very good loan, very good product, but you would not approve the HPAP, and I could not get that. So I would like for you to consider allowing HPAP to be a part of the down payment. This was a school teacher, everything, credit score, no criminal records, and seemed to be a very sweet person. We wanted her in the co-op because we thought she would have been a plus for the co-op. And she ended up not getting it. We ended up getting a good resident, a good owner, but we had to go through again. And that looked like the package was great. And I couldn't understand why you all didn't. And I'm sorry I didn't reach out to you then.
Yeah, it's too bad. But I like I said, I'm a good listener, Vernon. So I'm writing notes right now, and I will have an answer for you on that one. I'll be calling you back after the show.
And so now, thank you. I would like to talk about the future. Hopefully, coming out of COVID, there's new variances all the time and stuff, but hopefully we're coming out of COVID, and we've got to, I think, learn how to live with it. I think it's going to be with us. How do you see the bank coming out of COVID and helping co-ops?
So, I think, we are just finalizing our strategic plan right now, and I think that how I envision helping co-ops over the next couple of years is staying true to our values and staying true to our mission. I think NCB not only provides, the loans and deposits and financial services. I think we are, an important force in the co-op community. One of the ways our plan, intends to do that is grow our own balance sheet. I think we're looking to grow 33% over the next 3 years. And I think what that allows us to do is touch more co-ops, be a more important player in the co-op space by growing our own balance sheet, and doing so living our values. And, we didn't talk about that today, Vernon, but real quickly, when we defined our culture at NCB, we came up with, I think, 7 values, and they're customer focus, accountability, collaboration, empowerment, diversity, inspiration, and integrity. And those are at the core of what we're doing in the future. That's both internally amongst ourselves at NCB, but extended to our customers. And that's how we define our culture, and I think we want that culture to drive the future. We're a mission organization, so in addition to growing the balance sheet, and we gotta stay true.
Stay true to the values, stay true to the mission. Brother, I look forward to working with you in the future, and I think it's just tremendous opportunity. Thank you for being on, and everybody out there, please live cooperatively.